The message arrived on a Tuesday, which was strange, because the Galactic Council never sent anything on Tuesdays. Ambassador Quan Tejo was sitting in his small office aboard the Galactic Concorde station, drinking tea from a metal cup that had traveled with him all the way from Earth. He read the message twice, then he read it a third time, just to be sure. The Galactic Council required all provisional species to complete something called the Standard Evaluation Protocol. It was a series of tests, physical tests, mental tests, behavioral tests. Every species that wanted full membership in the Council had to take them. The results would determine where humanity would be placed in the galactic hierarchy. Worker caste, scholar caste, diplomatic caste, or in very rare and unfortunate cases, restricted caste. Tejo did not know much about the restricted caste, but the name alone made him uncomfortable. He finished his tea and sent a message to 4 people he trusted more than anyone else in the galaxy. Han Ji-woo arrived first. He was a former military officer with calm eyes and a quiet voice that somehow made everyone around him pay attention. He read the summons, nodded once, and sat down without saying a word. That was Ji-woo. He never wasted words. Nari came next, almost running through the door with her tablet already open. She was the team's xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life for a living, and she loved every second of it. She had already pulled up everything she could find about the Standard Evaluation Protocol. Most of it was classified. She was annoyed about that. Baek Do-ha walked in third. He was the security officer, and he was enormous. His shoulders barely fit through the doorway, but his voice was soft and warm, and the first thing he did was offer everyone a snack he had brought from the human quarter of the station. He always carried snacks. Shin Yuna was last. She was an engineer and crisis response specialist, which meant she was the person you called when everything was falling apart and someone needed to fix it in 5 minutes or less. She had sharp eyes and a fast mouth, and she was already asking questions before she sat down. Tejo explained the situation. The council wanted them to take tests. It was described as routine, a formality, nothing to worry about. Nari frowned. If it is nothing to worry about, why does it feel like something to worry about? Ji-woo looked at her. Because nothing in politics is ever routine. Tejo smiled at both of them. We will be polite. We will be cooperative. We will take their tests and show them that humans are good neighbors. That is all. Do we get lunch after? Yes, Do-ha. We get lunch after. Then I am in. The testing was scheduled for the following day. That evening, the team walked through the station toward their quarters. The Galactic Concorde station was a massive structure, built in neutral space where no single species held power. It was home to hundreds of alien races, thousands of diplomats, and more politics than any one person could track. The hallways were wide and tall, designed to fit species of all sizes, but the gravity felt lighter than Earth. The air was thinner, too. Nari noticed it right away. The atmospheric mix is calibrated for the average galactic species, she said, checking her tablet. Lower oxygen, lower pressure, about 70% of Earth's standard. Yuna stretched her arms above her head. Feels like being on a mountain. Not bad, actually. Ji-woo said nothing, but his eyes moved across every surface, every doorway, every panel. He always measured. They passed a group of Telvari in the corridor. The Telvari were tall, thin, and bird-like, with hollow bones and delicate feathers that shimmered under the station lights. They moved carefully, as if the world might break them. One of them was Counselor Vetha, the head of the evaluation committee. She watched the humans pass with sharp, unblinking eyes. After the humans were gone, Vetha turned to her assistant, a nervous aquatic creature named Lisok, who belonged to the Drenari species. Lisok had too many tentacles and not enough confidence. They seem unremarkable, Vetha said. Lisok tapped his datapad. Their homeworld survey suggests a mid-range environment. Nothing exceptional. I expect worker caste placement. Vetha nodded slowly. Good. The last thing this council needs is another species with ambitions above its station. Process them quickly. I want this done before the next session. Counselor. The original survey of their planet was conducted by a long-range probe. The data is limited. Limited is sufficient, Vetha said. They are soft creatures from a soft world. The tests will confirm it. She walked away, her feathers catching the light like glass. Back in the human quarters, the team settled in for the night. The rooms were comfortable, but clearly designed for smaller, lighter beings. Doha sat on his bed, and it groaned under his weight. Yuna laughed and told him to sleep on the floor. Nari was already studying everything she could find about past evaluations. She learned that the average species completed the physical tests in a few hours. Most scored in the middle range. A few exceptional species, like the Gorvan warrior caste, scored high. Nobody had ever scored off the charts. What do you think they will test? Yuna asked, leaning against the wall. Strength, endurance, environmental tolerance, pain resistance, cognitive ability, social behavior, Nari listed. Standard stuff. Ji Woo looked up from his book. Standard for who? The question hung in the air. Taeho, who had been quiet, finally spoke. We go in tomorrow. We do our best. We do not show off. We do not hide. We just be ourselves. Doha smiled. That is what worries me. Nobody laughed, but everyone understood. That night, while the station hummed quietly around them, and alien stars burned outside the windows, the 5 humans slept peacefully. They did not know that they were about to break every record in the Council's history. They did not know that their homeworld had been misclassified. They did not know that by the end of the week, every species in the galaxy would know their names. They slept like people who had grown up on a world where the weather could kill you, the animals could eat you, and the ground itself could shake apart beneath your feet. They slept like it was nothing. The evaluation chamber was deep inside the station, behind 3 security doors and a corridor so long that Nari counted her steps out of habit. 412. She told Doha, and he told her that was a lot of steps, and she told him that was not a scientific observation, and he told her he was not a scientist. Yuna told them both to shut up because they were giving her a headache. The chamber itself was enormous. It was a round white room filled with machines and monitors and devices that none of the humans recognized. Along the upper walls, observation windows glowed faintly. Behind those windows sat dozens of council officials, scientists, and military observers. They had come to watch the newest species be measured, classified, and filed away. Among the observers was Reska, a Gorvan warrior. She was large even by Gorvan standards, with thick reptilian scales and eyes like polished stone. The Gorvan were considered the strongest species in the council, and Reska had come to watch the soft little humans struggle. She expected entertainment. A team of Dranari technicians greeted the humans at the entrance. Lisok was among them, clutching his datapad like a lifeline. He explained the first test with a voice that trembled slightly. Strength assessment. The subjects would lift a series of calibrated weights. The weights increased in difficulty. The maximum threshold represented the upper limit of known galactic species. Please begin when ready, Lisok said. Doha stepped forward first. He looked at the weights. They were arranged on a platform, sleek and metallic, with numbers etched into the sides. He picked up the first one. It was light. He picked up the second. Still light. He moved through the entire set without pausing. When he reached the maximum weight, the one that was supposed to represent the absolute peak of biological strength in the galaxy, he picked it up with one hand. He held it at his side like a grocery bag, and turned to Lisok. Is there more? Lisok stared at him. Behind the observation glass, two technicians began arguing. One of them ran a diagnostic on the equipment. Counselor Vetha, who was watching from a private booth, ordered an immediate recalibration. The equipment was not broken. Doha was simply that strong. Jiwoo went next. He was not as large as Doha, but he lifted the maximum weight with both hands and held it steady above his head for 30 seconds without shaking. Taeho, Nari, and Yuna each completed the set as well. Yuna struggled slightly on the last weight, but still lifted it. She was annoyed with herself. Doha told her she did great. She told him to stop being nice. It was suspicious. The humans were placed on treadmill-like devices and told to run until they could not run anymore. Most galactic species lasted between 10 and 20 minutes. The Gorvan record was 42 minutes. Yuna started running at a comfortable pace. Nari ran beside her. They talked the entire time. They talked about the station food, about a documentary Nari had watched, about deep-sea creatures on Earth, about whether Doha's snacks were actually good, or if they were all just too polite to say otherwise. They talked about home. 20 minutes passed, then 40, then an hour. Lissok looked at his datapad, then at the humans, then back at his datapad. He cleaned the screen with his tentacle and looked again. The numbers had not changed. At the 90-minute mark, Jiwoo stopped running, not because he was tired, but because he was bored. He stepped off the machine and stretched. Taeho stopped at the same time, breathing a little heavier, but otherwise fine. Doha lasted another 10 minutes before he said his knee was bothering him and he should probably stop. Yuna ran for 2 hours and 14 minutes. She stopped only because Nari stopped at 2 hours, and she did not want to run alone. Both of them were sweating, but neither was in distress. Yuna asked if there was water. A technician handed her a container with shaking hands. Up in the observation booth, Reska had stopped smiling a long time ago. The third test was environmental tolerance. The humans were placed one at a time in sealed chambers that simulated different conditions: extreme cold, extreme heat, low oxygen, high pressure, toxic atmosphere traces. Each condition was held for a set period, and the subject's vitals were monitored in real time. Jiwoo sat in the cold chamber at a temperature that would kill a Telvari in 4 minutes. He sat there for 20 minutes, reading something on his tablet. When they opened the door, he looked up and asked if the test had started. The monitoring team did not know how to respond. Nari tolerated the heat chamber without complaint. Doha endured the high-pressure environment and said it reminded him of diving back home. Yuna breathed calmly in the low-oxygen chamber and said it was like hiking in the mountains. Taeho sat through every chamber with the same patient expression he wore during council meetings. The humans tolerated conditions that spanned a range considered lethal to over 80% of known species. The technicians ran the numbers 3 times. The numbers did not change. The fourth and final physical test was pain resistance. A mild neural stimulus was applied to each subject. It was the maximum allowed under council ethics guidelines. For most species, it was deeply unpleasant, sometimes enough to cause involuntary sounds of distress. Taeho felt the stimulus and blinked. Was that it? Nari tilted her head. I felt a small buzz, like static. Doha laughed. Actually laughed. That tickles a little. Jiwoo felt it and showed no reaction at all. He simply looked at the technician and gave a small nod, as if to say he was ready for the real test. Yuna rubbed her arm where the stimulus had been applied. On Earth, I once stepped on a piece of building material called Lego. That was worse. Nobody in the observation room understood what a Lego was. But every single one of them understood that something was very, very wrong with their assumptions about humans. Reska stood at the observation window for a long time after the tests ended. She had come to watch weak creatures fail. Instead, she had watched 5 beings from a species she had never heard of casually surpass every physical benchmark the Council had ever set. She thought about her training, her battles, her pride as a Gorvan warrior, and for the first time in her life, she felt something cold settle in her chest. It was not hate. It was not anger. It was fear. Below, in the testing chamber, Doha was offering a snack to one of the trembling Drenari technicians. The technician accepted it with a shaking tentacle. Doha smiled at him and said it was his favorite flavor. The humans have broken every record in the room, and they did not even know it. They thought it was a normal day. They thought the tests were easy. They thought everyone could do this. That was the most terrifying part of all. The next morning, the humans were escorted to the cognitive wing of the evaluation chamber. This section looked different. The walls were lined with screens and holographic projectors. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Nari liked it. Doha did not. He said it smelled like the time Yuna accidentally set fire to a toaster on the ship. Yuna told him that was one time, and the toaster had it coming. Lisok was waiting for them with a new team of technicians. He looked like he had not slept. His tentacles moved in small, nervous patterns, and his datapad was covered in notes he had written during the night. He greeted the humans politely and explained the next set of tests. Cognitive ability, problem solving, pattern recognition, and finally, a tactical simulation designed to test decision-making under extreme pressure. The first test was pattern recognition. Each subject was shown a series of increasingly complex visual, mathematical, and logical puzzles on a screen. The difficulty scaled upward. Most species completed between 60 and 70% before the puzzles became too hard. The all-time council record was 89%, held by the Yanari, the species of Grand Arbiter Pomal himself. Nari sat down in front of the screen and began. She moved through the early puzzles like they were nothing. Her fingers tapped the answers almost before the questions fully appeared. The middle section slowed her down slightly, but she adapted, adjusting her approach for each new type of problem. The technicians watched her progress bar climb. 80%, 85, 90. She finished the entire battery at 97%. Then she raised her hand politely and told Lisok that questions 44 and 61 had errors in their answer keys. She showed him the correct solutions on her tablet. She had solved the test and then corrected it. The testing AI flagged her results as an anomaly. Lisok quietly marked her file with a note that simply said, unprecedented. Jiwoo scored 94%. Taeho scored 91. Yuna scored 88, which she blamed on the fact that she was an engineer and not a puzzle person. Doha scored 82%, which was still higher than the average of any species in the Council's records. He shrugged and said puzzles were not his thing. But the cognitive test was just the beginning. The real trial was the tactical simulation. The 5 humans were led into a large holographic chamber. The room was empty at first, just black walls and a smooth floor. Then the lights changed, and suddenly they were standing in the middle of a ruined city. Buildings burned around them. The sky was dark with smoke. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm was sounding. The ground shook beneath their feet. Lisok's voice came through a speaker. This is the Omega Crisis scenario. You are stranded in a hostile environment. Your objective is to survive, reach the extraction point, and protect a group of simulated civilians. The scenario is calibrated for failure. No species has ever completed it. You have 90 minutes. The humans looked at each other. Jiwoo spoke first. His voice was calm and clear, the voice of a man who had been in real situations worse than this. Yuna, assess the structures. Find us a safe route. Nari, locate the civilians. Doha, you are on protection. Taeho, stay in the center. You are our communicator and decision-maker." Nobody argued. Nobody hesitated. They moved. Yuna scanned the nearest buildings in seconds. She identified load-bearing walls, structural weaknesses, and a path through the wreckage that avoided the worst of the fires. She found a collapsed bridge, and using debris from the environment, improvised a crossing that the simulation had not anticipated. The system struggled to process her solution because it was not in the scenario's programming. Nari found the civilians, a group of small holographic figures huddled in a damaged building. She calmed them with gestures and guided them toward the team. She moved carefully, checking every corner, every shadow. Her training as a biologist taught her to observe, and she noticed patterns in the simulation's threats. She began predicting where danger would appear before it appeared. Doha positioned himself between the civilians and every threat that came. A simulated wall collapsed toward the group, and he physically braced it. The simulation registered his strength and adjusted, sending more obstacles. He held them all. He did not move. He did not flinch. The holographic rubble pressed against him, and he stood like a mountain. And then came the enemy. A simulated hostile force appeared, blocking the extraction point. The scenario was designed so that no team could fight through them. The intended outcome was failure. Tejo stepped forward. He raised his hands, showing he was unarmed, and then he began to speak. He spoke to the simulated enemies, calmly and clearly, offering terms of surrender, proposing a ceasefire, finding common ground. The simulation's AI was not programmed for negotiation. It had no protocol for an enemy who chose words over weapons. But Tejo kept talking, and somehow, impossibly, the simulation responded. The hostile force stood down. The extraction point opened. The civilians reached safety. The timer showed 43 minutes remaining. In the observation room, there was absolute silence. Counselor Vetha stood at the glass, with her feathers pressed flat against her body, a sign of deep distress in Telvari. Reska stood beside her, arms folded, saying nothing. Lisok, tentacles had gone completely still, which meant he was either thinking very hard or about to faint. Nobody had ever completed the Omega scenario. The humans had not just completed it, they had broken it. They had used the simulation's own rules against it. They had cooperated without detailed planning, adapted without warning, and maintained emotional stability under conditions designed to cause panic. And they had laughed. In the middle of a burning city, with simulated explosions going off around them, Doha had made a joke about the fire, reminding him of Yuna's cooking. Yuna had insulted him back. Nari had laughed so hard she almost tripped. And somehow, impossibly, they had kept moving, kept working, kept surviving. Lisok went back to his quarters that night and did something he should have done before the tests began. He pulled the original survey data for Earth. The planet had been scanned by a long-range probe decades ago, a cheap model sent to catalog unremarkable systems. The probe's atmospheric sensors had malfunctioned. Its gravity readings were incomplete. Its biological survey had captured less than 1% of Earth's surface. He cross-referenced the humans' test results with the Council's planetary classification system. Strength consistent with high-gravity environments. Endurance consistent with persistence predators. Environmental tolerance spanning extreme cold to extreme heat. Pain resistance far beyond known baselines. A toxic atmosphere of reactive oxygen. An ecosystem of relentless, competitive, deadly organisms. His tentacles trembled as the classification appeared on his screen. Earth. Class 12 Deathworld. The highest category. A designation so rare that most council species considered it mythological. There were only 3 known Deathworlds in the galaxy, and none of them had produced intelligent life. Until now. Lisok ran to Vetha's quarters. He showed her the data. She read it once, she read it again. Then she sat down slowly, and said something in Telvari that Lissok had never heard a counselor say before. Meanwhile, in the human quarters, everything was peaceful. Nari was sitting on the floor, feeding a small, furry alien creature that had wandered in through a ventilation duct. She had already named it Bori. It made a soft chirping sound and curled up in her lap. Doha was doing push-ups in the corner. Yuna was sketching a redesign of the station's water recycling system on her tablet because she had noticed it was inefficient and it was bothering her. Jiwoo was reading quietly on his bed. Taeho was writing a report to Earth, describing the tests as uneventful. None of them knew that 3 floors above them, a Drenari scientist was rewriting the classification of their entire planet. None of them knew that by morning, the most powerful beings in the galaxy would be afraid of them. Bori chirped softly in Nari's arms. She scratched behind its ears and smiled. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. It was a quiet night on the station. It would be the last quiet night for a long time. The Grand Council Chamber was the largest room on the station. It was shaped like a bowl, with hundreds of seats rising in curved rows around the central platform. Every seat was filled. Species of all sizes and shapes sat together, their translators humming softly as whispers spread through the room like wind through tall grass. The air was thick with tension. Something was wrong, and everyone knew it, but nobody knew exactly what. Grand Arbiter Pomal stood at the center platform. He was ancient, even by Yanari standards. His insectoid body was tall and thin, covered in a dark shell that had dulled with age. His eyes, 4 of them, moved slowly across the chamber. He had served the council for over 200 years. He had overseen the classification of 37 species. He had never called an emergency session before. Today, he had called one. "The closed session will begin," Pomal said. His voice was dry and precise. "Observer Lissok, present your findings." Lissok stood at a small podium near the center. His tentacles were wrapped tightly around his datapad, and his skin had gone pale, which in Drenari meant extreme stress. He took a breath that was more like a shudder and began. He showed the physical test results first. Strength scores that exceeded every species on record. Endurance that doubled the Gorvan benchmark. Environmental tolerance that spanned conditions lethal to 80% of the galaxy. Pain resistance so high that the testing equipment could not find their threshold. He showed the cognitive scores, the completed Omega scenario, the improvised tactics, the negotiation that should have been impossible. And then he showed the planetary data. Earth appeared on the main screen. A blue and green world, beautiful from a distance. Lissok began listing its features. Gravitational force significantly higher than the galactic average. An atmosphere composed of a highly reactive gas called oxygen that was toxic to most known species. Temperature swings from extreme cold to extreme heat, sometimes within the same region. Massive storms capable of destroying entire settlements. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, wildfires, an ocean that covered most of the surface and was filled with predators. And the biology. Earth's ecosystem was a war. Every organism competed for survival against every other organism. Predators hunted prey. Prey evolved defenses. Predators evolved to overcome those defenses. The cycle had been running for billions of years, producing creatures of terrifying efficiency. Humans were not the strongest animal on their world. They were not the fastest. They were not the most armored. But they had survived everything their planet had thrown at them, and they had done it by becoming the most adaptable, most cooperative, most relentless species Earth had ever produced. Lissok's voice was barely above a whisper when he delivered the final line. Earth meets every criterion for Class 12 Deathworld classification. The original survey was in error. Humans are Deathworld beings. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species spoke at once. Translators struggled to keep up. Fear, anger, disbelief, and outrage filled the room like smoke. Some delegates stood from their seats. Others shrank back as if the word Deathworld itself was dangerous. Counselor Vetha was the first to speak formally. She stood tall, her feathers sharp and raised, and her voice cut through the noise like a blade. This council must act immediately. The humans must be placed under restricted caste classification. Their access to council space must be revoked. Their ships must be confined to their home system. They are not neighbors. They are apex predators from one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy, and we have been treating them like guests. Several species voiced agreement. The Talvari delegation supported Vetha fully. The Drenari looked terrified. A cluster of smaller species near the back began talking about evacuation protocols. But then, Reska stood. The Gorvan warrior rose from her seat slowly. She was the largest person in the room, and when she spoke, her deep voice carried without effort. I watched the humans during their tests. Every moment. I came to see them fail. I was wrong. The chamber quieted slightly. Yes, they are strong, Reska continued. Stronger than us. That is not easy for me to say, but I watched what they did with that strength. The large one, Doha, lifted the maximum weight with one hand, and then he offered food to the technician who was afraid of him. The woman, Yuna, ran for over 2 hours, and then she asked for water politely. They completed the impossible scenario, and the first thing their leader did was try to talk instead of fight. She looked directly at Vetha. A truly dangerous species does not hold back. A truly dangerous species does not apologize when it accidentally breaks your equipment. I have fought many enemies in my life, Counselor. These humans are not enemies. They are something else. And if you lock them away because you are afraid, you will make them into the very thing you fear. The chamber was split. Arguments flew back and forth. Delegates threatened to withdraw. Alliances shifted. Pomal watched it all with his 4 ancient eyes and said nothing. And then he gave the order that changed everything. Summon the human ambassador. Quan Teho was in his quarters when the message arrived. He was not told why he was being summoned. He put on his formal coat, straightened his collar, and walked to the grand chamber alone. He had offered to bring his team, but the summons specified only him. Jiwoo had wanted to come anyway. Teho told him to stay. If they wanted soldiers, they would have asked for soldiers. They asked for a diplomat. Let me do my job. The doors of the grand chamber opened, and Teho walked in. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. Some were curious. Some were hostile. Many were afraid. He could feel the fear in the room, the way a person feels humidity, heavy and everywhere. He walked to the center platform and stood before Grand Arbiter Pomal. Pomal looked down at him. Ambassador Quan, your species comes from a world that this council has classified as a Class 12 death world, the most hostile category of planetary environment known to galactic science. Your bodies are built for survival and violence on a scale that no other intelligent species can match. Your physical and cognitive abilities exceed every benchmark we have. You are, by every measure we possess, the most dangerous beings to ever seek membership in this council. He paused. The silence was absolute. Why should we trust you? Teho stood still for a moment. He looked up at the rows of faces, the hundreds of species watching him, waiting for him to say something threatening or defensive or angry. He felt the weight of humanity on his shoulders. Not just the 5 members of his team, but every person on Earth, every child, every farmer, every teacher, every grandmother, all of them reduced to this single moment. He spoke quietly, but in that silence, quiet was enough. You are right, he said. Our world is dangerous. Everything on Earth is trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the oceans, the land beneath our feet, sometimes even each other. We have fought wars. We have caused terrible suffering. I will not pretend otherwise." He paused. Then he continued. "But we survived, not by being the most violent, not by being the cruelest. We survived by learning to work together, by reaching out to each other in the dark, by choosing, again and again, to help the person next to us, even when it was easier not to. The strongest thing we ever built was not a weapon, it was trust." He looked directly at Pomal. "We are not here to conquer anyone. We are here because for the first time in our entire history, we looked up at the stars and thought, maybe we do not have to survive alone anymore. Maybe there are others out there. Maybe we can help each other." He let the words settle. "You ask why you should trust us. I cannot give you a reason that will satisfy everyone in this room. Trust is not something you give because someone asks for it. It is something that is earned, and we are willing to earn it, however long it takes. Not the tense silence of fear, but something deeper. Something that felt, for just a moment, like the beginning of understanding." Pomal stared at the human for a very long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "This session is adjourned for deliberation. The council will deliver its ruling within 3 days." Teho bowed respectfully and walked out of the chamber. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was calm. He had done what he came to do. Behind him, in the vast bowl of the grand chamber, hundreds of species sat in silence, thinking about a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy and the impossible creatures it had made. 3 days passed. They were the longest 3 days in the history of human-galactic relations, which was not saying much, because human-galactic relations were only 3 years old, but they felt long. The human team stayed in their quarters. Teho had told them what happened in the Grand Chamber, or at least the parts that mattered. He told them that the Council had discovered Earth was a death world. He told them the Council was afraid. He told them he had spoken, and he believed his words had been heard. But he did not know if they had been enough. Doha had listened quietly, and then asked if anyone wanted to play cards. They played cards. Nari spent the 3 days studying every piece of galactic biology she could access. Bori, the small creature she had adopted, sat on her shoulder and occasionally chewed on her hair. She did not mind. Jiwoo read. He had brought 4 books with him from Earth, and he was on his 3rd. Yuna spent the time drawing up a complete redesign of the station's emergency evacuation system, which she said was dangerously outdated. Nobody had asked her to do this. She did it anyway because it bothered her. On the morning of the 3rd day, the summons came. All 5 humans were requested in the Grand Council chamber. Full, formal session. Every species would be present. Teho straightened his coat. Jiwoo checked his cuffs. Nari tucked Bori into a small carrying pouch she had made from spare fabric. Doha cracked his knuckles, which made a sound loud enough that a passing Telvari in the corridor flinched. Yuna put her tablet in her pocket in case she got bored. They walked to the chamber together. The Grand Council chamber was even more full than before. Species filled every seat, every standing area, every observation balcony. When the 5 humans entered through the main doors and walked down the central aisle toward the platform, the buzzing stopped. Every eye, every sensor, every optical organ in the room turned toward them. They walked side by side. They did not hurry. They did not slow down. They walked the way humans walk when they know the whole world is watching, and they have decided to be steady anyway. Grand Arbiter Pomal stood at the center platform. He waited until the humans reached him, and then raised one long, thin arm for silence. The chamber obeyed. 3 days ago, Pomal began, this council learned that the species known as humans originates from a Class 12 death world. This classification places their homeworld among the most hostile environments in the known galaxy. Their biological capabilities exceed every standard of measurement this council possesses. By every physical and cognitive metric, they are the most formidable species ever to seek membership among us. He paused. The chamber held its breath. This council has debated at length. There were those who argued for restriction. There were those who argued for expulsion. And there were those who argued for something this council has never done before. He turned to face the humans directly. In the history of the Galactic Council, every species has been placed into one of four castes: worker, scholar, diplomat, restricted. These categories have served us for thousands of years, but they were built for species that fit within known parameters. Humanity does not fit within known parameters. Taeho felt his team standing behind him. Doha's solid presence at his left, Jiwoo's quiet focus at his right, Nari's warmth, Yuna's sharp energy. He did not need to. Therefore, Pomal continued. By majority vote of the full council, the following ruling is entered into the permanent record. Humanity is not assigned to any existing caste. Instead, for the first time in galactic history, a new classification has been created. He let the words land. Guardian Caste. A sound moved through the chamber, not quite a gasp, not quite a murmur, something between recognition and awe. The Guardian Caste, Pomal explained, is designated for a species deemed too powerful to be constrained, but too compassionate to be feared. Humans will serve as protectors, mediators, and first responders for the Galactic Council. They will be called upon in times of crisis. They will stand between the weak and the dangerous, and they will be trusted, not because they are harmless, but because they choose to be gentle. He looked at Taeho. Do you accept this classification on behalf of your species? Taeho was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he bowed, low and respectful, the way his grandmother had taught him when he was a boy in a small town on Earth. We accept, and we will earn it. The chamber erupted, not in fear this time, but in something else. Some species cheered. Some stamped their feet or tentacles. Some simply stared in wonder. The Gorvan delegation roared, a sound of respect. The smaller species near the back looked at the humans with wide eyes, and something that looked like hope. Counselor Vetha did not cheer. She sat in her booth, feathers flat, watching the humans with the same sharp, unblinking eyes. She was not happy. She would never be happy about this. But she was intelligent enough to know when a battle was lost. Later, as the crowd dispersed, she approached Taeho in the corridor. Not everyone will accept this, she said. Her voice was cold, but not hostile. There will be those who fear you. Those who test you. Those who try to prove that you are what they believe you are. Taeho met her eyes calmly. We are used to that. Vetha held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. It was not friendship. It was not even respect. But it was acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. Reska found Doha near the refueling bay. She walked up to him, squared her massive shoulders and looked him in the eye. Warrior to warrior, she said, I challenge you to a sparring match. Doha looked at her. She was nearly as tall as he was, covered in thick scales, with arms built for combat. He grinned. I accept. But only if we get lunch after. Reska blinked. Lunch? Food, together, after we fight. That is how we do it on Earth. You fight someone, then you eat with them. It is tradition. Reska considered this. It was the strangest military custom she had ever heard. Lunch. It was the beginning of a friendship that would become legendary in Gorvan military academies for generations. Nari was formally offered a position on the Council's Xenobiology Board. She accepted immediately, and with great enthusiasm, bringing Bori to her first meeting. Bori climbed onto the conference table and knocked over a glass of water. 3 council members filed noise complaints within the first week. Nari did not care. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Jiwoo was approached quietly by the Council's Intelligence Division. They wanted him to lead a joint security task force, a team that would combine human capabilities with galactic species' specialized skills. Jiwoo declined the leadership role. He said he preferred to teach. They did not understand why he smiled when he said it. They would understand later, when his trainees became the most effective operatives the Council had ever produced. Yuna submitted her redesign of the station's evacuation system, water recycling system, and power grid on the same day. The station's chief engineer, a tall, four-armed being named Talik, read the proposals 3 times. He could not find a single flaw. He promoted Yuna to consulting engineer before the end of the week. She immediately began pointing out new problems. Talik was both grateful and exhausted. The standard evaluation protocol was officially retired and replaced with a new system that accounted for the possibility that the galaxy contained species far more capable than anyone had imagined. It was called, informally, and with a certain nervousness, the Jiwoo scale. Jiwoo himself found this mildly embarrassing. On the day the human delegation prepared to depart, the 5 of them gathered one last time in their quarters. The rooms that had felt too small and too fragile now felt familiar. Nari packed Bori into his carrying pouch. Doha finished the last of his snacks. Yuna downloaded her latest redesign files. Jiwoo placed his books carefully in his bag. Taeho stood at the window and looked out at the stars. Their ship, the KRS Horizon, was waiting at the docking port. It was a small ship by galactic standards, built for speed and endurance rather than comfort. It was, in many ways, very human. As the station shrank behind them, Nari came to stand beside Taeho at the observation window. Bori chirped softly on her shoulder. "Do you think they will ever truly trust us?" she asked. Taeho watched the stars for a long time. Each one was a sun. Each sun might have worlds. Each world might have life. The galaxy was vast and cold and full of things that wanted to survive. Humanity had always been good at survival. But now, they had a chance to be good at something more. "Trust is earned," he said quietly. "We have got time." Behind them, in the common area of the ship, Doha was teaching Yuna a card game he had invented that made absolutely no sense. Yuna was winning anyway, which made even less sense. Jiwoo sat in the corner with his 4th book, a faint smile on his face as he listened to them argue about the rules. Bori fell asleep on Nari's shoulder. The engines hummed. The stars stretched out ahead of them, vast and ancient and full of possibility. The galaxy had never seen anything like humans before. It did not know what to do with them. It did not know whether to fear them or welcome them, or simply stand back and watch in amazement. But the humans knew exactly what to do. The same thing they had always done. Survive, adapt, protect, and never, ever stop reaching out. The KRS Horizon flew on, a small ship carrying 5 ordinary people from an extraordinary world, heading home to tell 8 billion others that the stars were waiting. And the stars, for the first time in a very long time, were not quite so dark.